Yeah, sorry to be complicated.
Trim it out. Trim it out.
You like to?
You're a complicated man, Brandon.
I know, I really am. I am.
I think I would take this one 62.5. I like it to go over.
I did hear that. Yeah, I heard that.
Of the Georgia.
On that. Yeah, I'm ready to roll. I'm ready to roll.
Ready to take the lead this week.
That's right. You had a big Hello, everybody. Welcome in to Go with the Flow, presented by RS Andrews. My name is Brandon Adams. Happy to have Dari Pero from RS Andrews back with us here again this week. Of course, I'm broadcasting from my home, which makes me think about all the things that RS Andrews does for my home and everybody else's as well when it comes to those heating issues, plumbing, electrical issues, those types of things you think about at this time of year. And we'll certainly be telling you about that over the course of our show. We'll also be making some picks for this week's games. Dari, as we head into what is really an unprecedented portion of an unprecedented season, Egg Bowl, Iron Bowl, traditional rivalry games were last Saturday, but we've still got, we think, are 2 remaining weeks of regular season play in the SEC. And I think one of the things that'll be interesting to determine about this week's games is how some of the teams that played their big rival a week ago, how they respond to now the continued grind of the regular season. I think you have to go back to 2001 to find those regular season games taking place post end of season traditional rivalry. So that is definitely a storyline to be handicapped as you will look at the SEC slate and really the rest of the college football slate here this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. You know, we got another great week of some good SEC games going on. Still more football to be had. 'Tis the season. I see you got the holiday spirit in your background there at your house.
Yeah, it's nice.
Looking pretty nice. Yeah.
Always good to have a little bit of holiday cheer wrapped around you here. So I'm glad to have that. Looking forward to our picks here this week. Before we dive into this week's games, we want to give you an update on last week's games, where we stand for the season thus far. We'll show you these on the screen. These are our go with the flow standings for this year as the Dog Nation team, and our buddy Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews. We've been picking games all year long. The Dog Nation daily audience has been joining for this as well. So last week, our season-long leader, Mike Griffith, had a little bit of a give back, opening the door for others to get involved. He was just 3-5 on the week. Still 43-32 on the year, though, is Mike Griffith right now at the top of the standings. Jeff Sintel was not with us a week ago, so he's frozen in place where he was at 37-30 on the season. How about a big move, though, for Dari, now 40-35 on the year after a 4-4 week last week. He is certainly within shouting distance of the lead. Dog Nation daily audience also sat out last week, but they do remain with a winning campaign thus far, 34-33 on the year. Connor Riley also moved up into a winning mark thus far. You see him there at 38-37 after a 7-1 week last week. So Connor leaps ahead of both me and the Dog Nation daily audience in the standings there after going 7-1 last week. And of course, I'm at the bottom here at 35-40, but 4-4 last week. That's 3 straight non-losing weeks for me. So making a little bit of a move there at the bottom, but still plenty of ground to make up. And of course, the way the game works here on Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, in just a moment you'll hear from Dog Nation's Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, Connor Riley. As I said, the Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers, I'll make my picks on the big games of the weekend in the SEC and one big top 25 matchup out of the Big Ten. And then after that, Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews decides if he wants to go with the flow and join the consensus on those picks. Of course, we invite you to play along at home with your own picks as we make ours here on the program. And I also invite you to check out R.S. Andrews for all your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. This time of year, in a day like this, it's very cold outside my house. The heat is on. Even a hot-natured guy like me's got heat on a day like this. And if you're worried that yours is not ready to go for the winter that's just kind of getting started, but plenty more cold weather on its way, get the peace of mind you need online at rsandrews.com, and they'll take good care of you on that. We will also try to do our part to take good care of you with our picks, starting with Georgia hosting Vanderbilt on Saturday. Gigantic number for the Dogs here in SEC play, 35.5-point favorites after Georgia covered a 21.5-point number last week against South Carolina, and also got to win the week prior to that back at home against Mississippi State. So a chance for Georgia to stay hot, put up big points for a Vanderbilt team that is reeling. Vanderbilt had been good against the spread prior to last Saturday, but beaten up bad in a loss to Missouri. And we'll see, with rumors of more opt-outs and some locker room turmoil, we'll see exactly what it is the Commodores do bring into Athens on Saturday. In fact, we'll start with our picks on this game with Mike Griffith. Mike, tell us your thoughts on Georgia, huge favorite, hosting Vanderbilt. Give us your opinion.
Yeah, that sounds about right for me, BA. Obviously, senior day for Georgia. There's not a former roommate on the other sideline. I think the fifth-string tailback has gotten enough work now that Kirby feels comfortable with the fifth-string running back. So I'm going to say that Georgia's going to cover that line. I'm going to say they're even going to score over 50 points. I'm going to make it 55-10.
So Mike takes takes Georgia to cover against Vanderbilt there. How about Jeff Sintel, your thoughts on the Dogs and the Doors?
I would imagine my peers, since I gave them a pause last week to try and catch up with everyone in the standings, I would imagine my peers would probably say that Georgia will cover. Lots of things going on at Vandy. I think the main thing about this game is I don't think Kirby Smart has a coaching brother in the SEC fraternity to be nice to this Saturday. This number's 35.5. I think Georgia will cover that.
So Jeff also takes Georgia to cover in this game against Vanderbilt on Saturday. And now, Dog Nation's Connor Riley, give us your opinion.
So on principle, 5 touchdowns is just too big. However, I'm going to go against principles here. I don't even know what we're going to see out of Vanderbilt this week. They pretty clearly laid down last week against Missouri, and now you got to go play Georgia on the road. I don't feel great about it, but Georgia covered last week with relative ease, and I think they're going to do it again this week. I don't feel great about saying a 35.5-point team is going to cover. I'd feel a lot better if it were 34.5, but give me Georgia here.
Connor also taking Georgia, so it's a clean sweep for our Dog Nation scribes here thus far. Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers, they agree as well. 96% take the Bulldogs to get it done, minus the 35.5 points. And, you know, Dari, for me, this is a game where you have to be really, really careful because 35.5 points is obviously goes without saying a lot of points in a situation like this. And the most prominent memory that people have of Vanderbilt right now is losing to Missouri last week by more than 40 points. And obviously this is a depleted roster for the third consecutive week. We're saying that about a Georgia opponent. But what folks have kind of forgotten is that prior to last week's game against Missouri, Vanderbilt had actually covered in 3 straight games. So they've made a little bit of a habit of keeping it closer than the experts have thought this season. In fact, I believe they have a winning record against the spread thus far this year. They've been a huge underdog in virtually every single game. So there's a caveat to that. I simply don't know that I'm ready to trust Georgia to cover this kind of number right now. I'm impressed with what I've seen from Georgia the last couple of weeks. I thought last Saturday was a step in the right direction for the Bulldogs. They're getting better from where they were, certainly, prior to the Mississippi State game, but it's a slow process. And this next step to win a game like this by more than 35.5, I'm going to need to see it first to truly be able to expect it and enjoy it. So I'll be a contrarian here. I'll take Vanderbilt plus 35.5 with the flow by an overwhelming margin on the side of the Dogs. Do you expect Georgia to cover that big of a number? In other words, you want to go with the flow and take UGA.
Yeah, I really don't like this game where this line's at. Just kind of like Connor said, and some other people. I mean, it's a ton of points to lay. But I, like you, I've been saying I need to see it before I believe it, before I take these points. I've seen enough. I think the offense is doing enough with JT. I think he's moving the ball. Vanderbilt's pretty much given up. You usually get a little bit of fight though when your head coach gets fired. We'll see if they respond. But I'm going to go with Georgia to cover this game, and I'm hoping they can hang 50 points on Vandy. What's going to be interesting is the second half of this game. With temperatures dropping at nighttime, that ball becomes a little slick. It really, are they going to be able to get a big enough lead in that first half or not? I think they're going to have to run the ball a lot in the second half. But I'm going to take Georgia. Probably would just stay away from this game altogether, from betting it. But I'm going to take Georgia to cover.
Yeah, very interesting stuff there. And by the way, speaking of weather, that's potentially a factor in a number of the games from the league this weekend. We'll talk about that more as we head through the slate. Next on our list to look at, though, here is Auburn, fresh off a bad Iron Bowl loss at Alabama last week, coming back home to Jordan-Hare Stadium where the Tigers have been good. They'll host Texas A&M, who won last week against LSU, but not win over many of the critics who didn't think the Aggies put up enough style points in a 20-7 win that also just happened to be underneath the point spread for last week's game as well. So Texas A&M, currently ranked number 5 by the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. I have an Ohio State team that to this point only played 4 games. Maybe the Aggies have something to prove. Maybe that's motivation, or maybe the Tigers continue to do what they have done so much, which is thwart opponents when they've come into Jordan-Hare. 7 points is the number. Auburn is a home underdog. Mike Griffith, take it away.
Yeah, this is an intriguing matchup. Texas A&M, if we remember way back when, actually struggled with Vanderbilt. My, how things have changed. Auburn coming off a difficult loss against Alabama, outclassed. I think A&M wins this game, but I don't think they cover the spread. So I'm going to make it 30-27 Texas A&M.
So Mike on the side of Auburn with the cover there. Jeff Sintel, what do you think about the Tigers and the Aggies? Go ahead.
I don't think that number's high enough, Brandon. I think A&M's got this good juju rolling. I think A&M's trying to be that team that sneaks in no matter what happens with the SEC championship game loser. Kellen Mond. I like Auburn to lose this game, and I like Texas A&M to cover by about maybe I think 14 to 17 points. I think it's a big win for the Aggies.
So Jeff goes the other direction. He takes Texas A&M to win big there at Auburn on Saturday. Connor Riley, what do you think?
I was hoping Mike was just going to take last week, but not only am I taking Auburn to cover here at home, I'm picking Auburn to win outright here for no good reason other than when Gus Malzahn seems at his lowest, when he seems so close to potentially losing his job and Auburn forking up the buyout money, he finds a way to just give people enough hope there. And bonus numbers at home have been drastically better than they have been on the road in recent years. So because of that, give me the Tigers at home, not only to cover the 7.5 or 7 points, but to win outright.
So Connor on the side of Auburn in a big way, calling for the outright win. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, they disagree. 66% do take the Aggies here to cover the 7-point number on the road. Dari, this is kind of an interesting conflict game for me because both Texas A&M and Auburn are teams that I have really felt comfortable picking throughout this season. And in Auburn's case, especially when playing a game at home, and in a normal circumstance, as a 7-point home underdog, I would love Auburn here in this spot. They've covered 10 of their last 12 games at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Auburn is a very, very live home dog, in other words, just a very good team against the spread at home in general. But here's the flyer that I'm going to take. We have not seen Auburn play a home game after the Alabama game. And there's a bad trend for teams the week after Alabama. Anyway, when you factor in the emotion of losing your rival game and now having to come back and play this Saturday, I'm guessing there are very few fans in the stands there at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Some may be staying away given the fact that it's just a relatively meaningless game for Auburn. On the flip side of this, it's incredibly important for Texas A&M. I think they are good enough to cover the 7-point number, and I think they have the extra push needed to make sure they get that done. I'm a believer in A&M. I don't know that they're, one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the country, but I think they could knock on the door for being that 4th best team in the country. And this is the kind of game where you have a chance to prove that. I think A&M shows up in a big way. I typically love Auburn at home. Not this particular Saturday, though. Give me Texas A&M. Sure, they get that done. I'm a believer. That puts the flow on the side by a slight margin to Texas A&M there as well. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the Aggies?
I'm still upset with the Aggies letting LSU score so late to cover in that game last week. Here's a stat for you, Brandon. The road team is 7-1 against the spread in their last 8 meetings. So that would mean the Aggies are in a prime position to cover. However, I'm going to take Auburn here at home. I think Auburn's going to be able to run the ball straight at the Aggies, right through the teeth of their defense. I think Malzahn is going to have some tricks up his sleeve to out-game plan and out-maneuver Jimbo Fisher. I also like this, like Connor Riley in maybe a half a unit wager on the money line. I think Auburn is primed here to win. I disagree with you. I think Jordan-Hare is going to be packed at their full capacity, whatever that number is, because, people love Auburn. They love Auburn football. And you got number 5 ranked team coming in town. They're nothing more than to punch them in the mouth. And I think the fans are going to be out for that. Doesn't matter what happened last week. You chalk it up. It doesn't matter.
Of course, you should know when Dari says he's got half a unit on the game, half a unit for him is 5 dimes. So you should know that Dari's units may be a little bit bigger than some of the ones that we're kind of throwing around there. But listen, I think this is actually a really good game. Whether it's Gus Malzahn, proving that he deserves to remain as Auburn's coach and quietening some of that criticism that at least exists in the periphery, or it's Jimbo Fisher going on the road and, kind of leading a team to a big win that really makes them a part of the playoff conversation. I think for this late in the year, I think Auburn Texas A&M is actually a pretty good game.
It's a great game. This is one of the best games to watch this weekend. It's going to be great.
All right, so we'll keep going here on Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Maybe a little bit of a step down in enthusiasm, but I think still a pretty good game there as well. I believe this is known as the Battle Line rivalry between Missouri and Arkansas, 2 teams that kind of share the Ozark Mountains between each other. bit. In Missouri, this is also a game that was supposed to take place last week and didn't take place. There's at least one game that we're going to pick this week. We've already picked once on this show. We'll go back and compare the numbers to see if anybody else has changed their opinion. That's when we get to Alabama LSU. This game, I believe, was canceled last week before we had a chance to pick it. But nonetheless, Arkansas, Missouri not taking place last week will take place this particular week. Missouri hosts Arkansas, where it has been good for Rock Field all season long. Missouri is now a 3-point favorite in this game, kind of a wild swing from probably where this line would have been at a certain point during the season. Also a key note to be aware of. The Arkansas Razorbacks leading rusher, Rakeem Boyd, has now opted out on the rest of the season, and Missouri's been dealing with a depleted roster now for a number of weeks. So lots of player absences to sift through in all of this. But the number that matters, Missouri favored by 3. Mike Griffith, give us your opinion to start things off.
Yeah, it's interesting. Eli Drinkwitz saying earlier this week that, yes, they do negative recruit. Kind of a random thing to throw out there. I'm going to take Missouri over Arkansas. The Coach of the Year, Sam Pittman campaign has slowed down. They still have a couple pretty good wins over Mississippi schools in Tennessee. But I like Missouri to show me a win here and a cover, 34-20 Tigers.
I feel like Mike Griffith has used the show me state joke for Arkansas a few times this year already, or I should say for Missouri already, but getting that one in one more time there. He also takes Missouri to stand up at home against the Razorbacks. A lot of Georgia fans will be interested in remembering that Missouri is the remaining regular season game for Georgia after the Vanderbilt game this Saturday, and the assumption is that game will either be played December 12th or December 19th. We'll find more about that as we head towards the weekend. But it is Missouri for Mike Griffith. Jeff Sentell, what do you think about the Tigers and the Hogs?
You got to think Missouri's a little bit fresh, right? You got to think that Arkansas is the better football team. They've played better football. So when I look at this line, I like Arkansas by about 7 to 10 points. I think they will cover the line. I think Arkansas has just played better football, and it gets to this point of the year in December. That's what you got to go for.
So a confident Jeff Sentell all over Arkansas on the side of this pick, and on the opposite side of Mike Griffith. Connor Riley, how about you on Missouri and Arkansas?
So part of me is curious on how Arkansas looks off a bye, but Missouri played really well last week. I think this team is clicking at the right time of year. They're going to end up getting 3 home games in a row if Georgia and Missouri play next week in Columbia. So because of that, I like what I've seen out of Missouri, and I can't go against a Connor here. So give me Missouri and the 3 points at home.
So Connor taking Missouri there. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, they disagree. They are on the side of Arkansas by the tune of 61%. And, you know, Dari, Arkansas has been a team, once again, that I've also been on a lot this season, maybe stepping away from them a little bit as of late. I guess the deciding factor here for me is, and I do think this is a pretty difficult game to pick because, you know, for the most part, Arkansas has proven themselves capable of being a team that shows up each and every week. Yet Missouri has been really good at home. You know, not great away from home necessarily, although they did win in South Carolina 2 weeks ago. But, you know, blown out against Tennessee, you know, bad loss to Florida. But when getting a chance to play at home, we've seen upset over LSU. We've seen blowout against Vanderbilt. You know, we've seen, you know, some fairly impressive performances when getting a chance to play a big win against Kentucky. We've seen performances in Columbia that have been pretty good for the Tigers. I'm assuming that's enough to stand up here. I don't have a strong feeling on this game, but you can't help but notice what Missouri's been able to do in its own stadium thus far this year. I think Drinkwitz and Pittman both have done outstanding jobs so far this year. I guess I'm going to go Missouri here minus the 3, though. That puts the flow just slightly on the side of Missouri. You want to join the flow, go with the flow, and take Missouri.
I am. You know, I said all year long, Missouri's been really good at home, not just this year, but in years past, especially against the spread. Even with that, I think I've gone against them now most of the time this year when they played at home. So definitely not doing that anymore. I'm going to take Mizzou at home. I think this game is going to be really close. I think it's going to have a somewhat similar game flow as the Arkansas LSU game did. It's going to come down late. It's going to be close. It's going to be a fun game to watch. If the line dips below 3, I think that's really good for Missouri as well, just because I think it's going to be such a close game. But I think Mizzou at home, minus those points, is a good bet.
We are watching weather closely for the weekend. High of 48 in Columbia, Missouri on Saturday. Does get down to a low of 27 before the night is done. But chance of precipitation in Como, just 10% on Saturday. So actually, Columbia, Missouri does not stand as the worst weather destination for the league. We'll get more into, some of those really rough weather situations a little bit later on. It's actually going to be fairly mild at the time this game is scheduled to be played. That is certainly something to keep in mind there as we roll through here on Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. A game where weather will, I'm at least expecting to be a much bigger factor. Cold in Knoxville on Saturday, pretty significant chance of precipitation. It's Tennessee, losers of 5 straight games, all of which by double digits. Host Florida on Saturday. Vols are 17-point home underdogs here, and Florida's obviously trying to keep pace with, not just Alabama ahead of a SEC championship meeting coming up in a couple of Saturdays, but also Texas A&M, the other potential at-large team that could argue for a spot in the college football playoff. There's actually some drama, in other words, at stake for both these teams on Saturday. Tennessee fans calling for Jeremy Pruitt's head. Florida fans hoping to show that their team can belong in the National Elite conversation. As I said before, Vols, 17-point home underdogs, cold, rainy, maybe even some snow in Knoxville. Mike Griffith, give us your thoughts on the game. Go ahead.
There's rumors that it might snow in Knoxville. Gators don't like snow, and Gators don't like run teams that can keep them off the field for expanses of time, as Kentucky showed last week. I'm going to take Florida to win this game in very close fashion, 31-28. The Vols cover and put the scare of a lifetime into Dan Mullen.
It's a very bold prediction for Mike Griffith. I'll give him a ton of credit for that, expecting this Tennessee-Florida game to be as close as he says that it's going to be. He's certainly not afraid to put himself out there on that. Jeff Sintel, how about your take on the Gators and the Vols? Go ahead.
Wow, Brandon, I don't know what the contemporaries on the panel think, but it certainly sounds like the Volunteer Navy is taking on some water, a sinking ship. You got a 5-star decommitment recently from Jeremy Pruitt's program. I think Florida wins big. I think Florida wins bold. I think they win this one by about 24 points.
So Jeff solidly on the other side of Mike Griffith there. Jeff expecting Florida to go into Knoxville and do some big things. Connor Riley, how about your opinion?
Yeah, so if I didn't hear Mike just make the case there for Tennessee, I'd say that this is a circle the wagons game for the Volunteers. They need this game just to even be close, because the last 2 times Pruitt and Mullen have met up, it has been very ugly for Tennessee here. However, I have some ground to make up in the standings, and because of that, give me Florida and the 17 points. I think they're going to want to throw it around a bunch, and I know the weather might scare you a little bit, but I just think with Kyle Pitts out there, this team is too good to mess around with its food against Tennessee.
So Connor, maybe a strategic play, but he goes in the direction of Florida there. An unusual scenario for our Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers. 55% of them take Florida. They typically love going against the Gators, but maybe the Dog Nation Daily audience has lost total respect for Tennessee. Maybe that's what this comes down to. Dari, it has not been perfect for Florida in the last 2 weeks. They did eke out a cover against Kentucky last Saturday, kind of messed around and failed to cover against Vanderbilt, although they did make a run towards that point spread by the end of the game. I'm not alarmed by that necessarily if I'm a Florida fan, but this has not been a pristine, perfectly played series of games for the Gators over the course of the last couple of weeks. But the recent history against Tennessee has been all Florida, even in a year last year where Tennessee showed some signs of improvement. Early in the season when playing Florida, it was a total demolition on the part of the Gators against Tennessee, and Florida has a lot to play for in this game. Now, maybe Jeremy Pruitt does too in terms of protecting his job status. At this point, though, I'm just not quite so sure what his capabilities are to even prevent the onslaught of criticism that seems to be mounting around him. 17's a lot on the road, especially when weather could be a factor, but I don't really see a lot from Tennessee right now that gives me reason to think that they'll put up a lot of resistance. If it wasn't a contest, this is not a game that I'm picking. It's not a game I'd be very eager to bet, but for the fun of what we do here, I'll take Florida minus the 17. That puts the flow on the side of the Gators. You want to go with the flow.
Well, what about this? It's senior day for Tennessee. Does that give you enough? No. Yeah, I don't think it's enough for them to keep it close.
Probably not, right?
Yeah, no. Trask picks combo can't be stopped. Give me the Gators. I think for this one, it may be worth buying a half point down. you can get in right now and get it at 16.5, I think that's a much safer play with this since that number's at 17. But yeah, give me the Gators.
So that is that from Dari Payer, our buddy from RS Andrews. Don't forget, RS Andrews take good care of you. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised for all of your air conditioning. Maybe not so much that these days, but certainly heating, plumbing, and electrical issues. A lot of you are about to go into a holiday season. We're going to have people over to your home, and when you have more people taking showers, things like that, there's a stress and pressure if your water heater were to go out. Well, even during this holiday time of year, in many cases, RS Andrews can replace your water heater for you the same day. But you just need to reach out and find them online at rsandrews.com, and they'll walk you through all that process. And you can find out what so many others have discovered, which is that story after story, RS Andrews has been delivering smiles. We love them, and we'll recommend them to you online at rsandrews.com. All right, next game to pay attention to as we continue through a busy slate in the SEC. Kentucky, fresh off blowout loss to Florida, blowout loss prior to that against Alabama, gets a chance to return to Lexington on Saturday, where it's expected to be very cold. High is only 40. The chance of precipitation is 50%. That includes rain and possibly some snow as well. South Carolina is the opponent. Gamecocks 11.5-point underdogs on the road after getting bludgeoned by Georgia last week. And Mike Bobo's second game as South Carolina's interim coach. Gamecocks last week played without a lot of key defensive pieces, and their roster is expected to be thin once again this Saturday as well. So with that in mind, Kentucky favored by 11.5. Mike, your thoughts on the Wildcats against the Gamecocks?
I saw that a Kentucky defensive back opted out this week. Mike Bobo in South Carolina looked pretty bad as well. This is an ugly game. Somebody's got to win. I'm going to take Kentucky, and I'm going to take them to cover because, to my knowledge, Mike Stoops was never a roommate of Mike Bobo's. So I think Kentucky will play 4 quarters of football and try and score on every possession and beat South Carolina 31-10.
So that is Mike on that, on the side of the Kentucky Wildcats. Jeff Sintel, how about you?
Man, this is just a dreadful game to look at for the SEC. Can you imagine being one of those dutiful professional broadcasters right now that are going over their scripts and their color codes and their depth charts, trying to figure out this matchup here? I like Kentucky. The line's at 11.5. I like Kentucky to cover an 11.5 just because of physicality, just because they're better up front, and they're still bought in with their head coach.
So that is Jeff on the side of the Kentucky Wildcats too. Connor Riley, how about for you?
I know that South Carolina team got whipped up a week ago, and I know there's some COVID concerns. 5-star Jordan Birch didn't play last week because of them. But that South Carolina team, I know they weren't good, but they played hard, and Kentucky really hasn't these last couple of weeks. Granted, they're playing against Alabama and Florida here. Quite frankly, I don't think this Kentucky team should be a 10-point favorite over anybody. I can't recall the last time they looked good. It was against Tennessee a while ago. So because of that, and I have to pick someone in this game, I'm just going to expect it to be a close game. Give me South Carolina here.
So Connor on the side of South Carolina, Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers go the other direction, 71% on Kentucky. And, Dar, you hear a lot of the Dog Nation team there kind of ripping on the game is not very good. My question is, are you a pro or are you a Joe? Because, listen, if you're an amateur, you look at a game like this and you just flip the channel and move on. But from a gambling standpoint, a win in a game like this pays every bit just as much as any of the other more attractive games on the SEC slate for the weekend. And I think there's a handicapping opportunity here. My question to you is, I think I even brought this up to you before the show. Given what's happened for Kentucky in recent weeks, blown out last week against Florida, lost by 24 points, gave up 63 to Alabama the week before that, only scored 3 points against Georgia, kind of prior to that. This is a Kentucky team that has been reeling now for a while. Who are they to be 11.5-point favorite literally over anyone? You can say, well, South Carolina is even worse. And on the basis of what happened last Saturday against Georgia, you can have some fodder for that argument. But the honest truth is, prior to that, I'd pick South Carolina to beat Missouri in the week 1 game for Mike Bobo as interim coach. That didn't happen. But if Bobo had pulled the trigger and going to Luke Doty at quarterback earlier in the game than he did, I think South Carolina, who's a 4.5-point underdog that day, lost by 7, would have had a chance to cover that number. I don't think it's an insurmountable task for the Gamecocks to keep this into a single-digit type situation on Saturday, when I do believe that they have the better quarterback, and for now, maybe even the better running game too. I really like South Carolina here, plus the 11.5 points. The flow is on the side of Kentucky, but I don't think this is a bad game from a gambling standpoint. Do you want to go with the flow and take Kentucky?
Both teams are not good. Both offenses have struggled. Kentucky's been competitive in some games this year, more so than South Carolina. They're probably the better team on both sides of the ball right now. But I'm going to take the Gamecocks. I'm with you. I think, them and the points, I'm going to take them one more time to cover this spread. I think double digits is a lot for Kentucky.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I haven't seen much of them. Now, do they come back home? They regroup a little bit after being away from home the last 2 weeks against what are arguably the two best teams in the SEC. Maybe there's a regroup factor here, but it's been a while since we've seen competent football from the Wildcats. A very different kind of game in Baton Rouge on Saturday, where Alabama, who has been an unmerciful juggernaut now for weeks and weeks and weeks, goes to LSU, where they are a 28-point road favorite. It's hard to imagine Alabama favored by this much on the road at LSU. As I mentioned earlier, this is also a game that we picked already once this season. Those picks are kind of, put in the time capsule, the time vault for now. We're repicking the game because of the new circumstances, although I don't necessarily think anyone's pick is going to be all that different from what it was when this game was initially slated to take place a few weeks ago. So with that in mind, the number is actually 28.5, I should say. 28.5-point favorites, Alabama on the road at LSU, possibly some revenge on the mind of the Crimson Tide after last year's game in Tuscaloosa, which was won by LSU and featured a lot of celebrating when it was over by Ed Orgeron and the rest of that Tigers team. Mike, your thoughts on the Crimson Tide going to the defending national champions? Take it away.
Kirby Smart said
this is, by the way, the second time we picked this game this season. But go ahead.
Kirby Smart said this week that he's been on the headphones plenty of time when Nick Saban said not to run the score up on the other coach because he's got a job to do. I'll guarantee you that none of those times were against LSU. Nick Saban and Alabama are going to absolutely destroy LSU and do all they can for Mac Jones and Najee Harris's respective Heisman campaigns. Throw Devontae in there as well. Let's make it Alabama 63, LSU 24.
So Mike calling for another 60-plus point explosion for LSU there. Very, very interesting to hear that. Jeff Sittentel, your thoughts on Alabama and LSU?
I think that the Alabama program is not above handing out some cold dishes of revenge to the LSU Tigers, especially after what happened last year. Mac Jones is like he's getting another wide receiver, some all-SEC receiver numbers this year. They're identifying more weapons. They're playing better. Look how stingy that defense has been over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks. Alabama will smite LSU. It'll put a lot of dust on that BCS championship trophy. I think Alabama wins this game by 35 points.
So a lot of love for Alabama thus far, including from Jeff Sittentel right there. Connor Riley, how about for you?
Nick Saban has a long memory, and he remembers last year losing that game in Tuscaloosa, and then Ed Orgeron running down and raving to the recruits there in the stands. I think Nick Saban is going to make it a point to go out and embarrass LSU and Ed Orgeron, who have been embarrassed quite a few times this year. And I think it's going to be real ugly. I know earlier I was worried about Georgia with 35.5. You can make this spread 40, and I'd still pick Alabama here.
So very confident. All three of our Dog Nation scribes loving Alabama. Listeners and viewers of Dog Nation Daily, they agree 91%, which is about as high as you're ever going to get on anything. 91% take Alabama here. And who am I to argue against this? Daria, I told you in some of our recent shows that one of the frustrations I've had is I feel like I've kind of irresponsibly gone against Alabama a couple of times thus far this season, and after the fact, you just end up really feeling really foolish. There's nothing worse than being wrong on the other side of Alabama because they have a way of making games look so easy. I have rubber stamped them as a pick the last couple of weeks, and I've really enjoyed doing so because it's just an easy win. Is this a motivation for Alabama to absolutely throttle LSU because they do have long memories for some of the peacock behavior that Ed Orgeron exhibited after last year's game? Or is this just a matter of get the easy win, move on for more important games after the fact? I'm not quite so sure, but I'm not sure Alabama is currently capable of playing a game in which they win by fewer than 28.5 points. They are just playing at that level right now. I don't love seeing it, but I have to acknowledge it when it does occur. There's, in my mind, no way LSU keeps this closer than 28.5 points. That's a clean sweep, by the way, on Alabama with a gigantic number at the defending national champs. You want to go with the flow and take Alabama here.
Yeah, no doubt. Roll Tide, taking Bama. LSU's defense is very religious. They're holy. Holes everywhere, Brandon. They're giving up 450 yards per game and over 300 yards in the air. Mac Jones and those wide receivers are going to feast. They're going to have a field day with them. Something to keep an eye on, though, for LSU is who's going to be starting a quarterback. TJ Finley or Max Johnson. Max Johnson, he's from Watkinsville here. He's the son of, Brad Johnson, who played for the Vikings in the NFL. He's also Mark Richt's nephew. He played really well when he came in last week against the Aggies. He was able to move that ball, and he was the one that actually got the cover for LSU. So it'll be kind of interesting to see if he gets a start and we get to see a full game with that kid slinging the ball around.
We will come back to the SEC before we're done, Georgia Vanderbilt in particular, with our thoughts on the expected point total for that game on Saturday at 4 p.m. But before that, only one game outside the SEC on the top 25 slate for this week. It is Indiana going to Wisconsin. The headline here is, for Wisconsin, not eligible for the Big Ten title game. They've missed too much football, but they could loom as a potential opponent for Ohio State on December the 19th if the Buckeyes don't qualify for the Big Ten championship game. And, of course, on the Indiana side, even more significant in terms of how you evaluate this game, Michael Penix Jr., the quarterback who has been so sensational for the Hoosiers all season long, including folks remember the Week 1 leaping score to win that game against Penn State. Penix is now injured out for the season. Point spread reflects this. 14.5 points is the number for Whiskey in Madtown against Indiana on Saturday. So top 25 matchup out of the Big Ten. Mike Griffith, you know the Big Ten. Start us off on this one.
Yeah, that's probably about right. I'm going to take Wisconsin 30-10. Michael Penix was the straw that stirred the drink. Albeit 3 years ago, Jeremy Pruitt said he wasn't good enough for the Vols and pulled his scholarship offer. Wisconsin, Camp Randall Stadium, that's a tough venue. Been there. The press box shakes when they jump around. Although I don't think 1,500 people jumping would do that. I do think Wisconsin will cover, though, against Indiana.
So Mike takes Wisconsin here, minus the 14.5 points. Jeff Sintel, how about for you?
Indiana. Sorry, guys. I like Wisconsin. I like Wisconsin to cover. I don't think this game, especially when you're working in Indiana's backup quarterback at this stage of the season against Wisconsin, I think Wisconsin's going to have 3 quarterbacks better than Indiana's guy on Saturday. I like Wisconsin to cover this spread and win handily. I think 21, 24 points.
So, Jeff, very confident Wisconsin here as well. Connor Riley, how about you? Badgers and Hoosiers, give us your opinion.
I'm going to take Indiana here. Their defense is actually pretty good. They forced Justin Fields into some mistakes, and Graham Mertz really struggled against a Northwestern team that just lost to Michigan State. So because of that, I don't expect Indiana to win the game outright, but 14, I believe it's 14.5. That's the number here. I think Indiana will keep it closer than that.
Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers disagree with Connor. You heard Connor take Indiana plus the points. 63% of the Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers on the side of the Badgers here. And I don't have an incredibly strong feeling on this other than the fact that I do think 14.5 points is a lot here for Wisconsin. Now, listen, I've got some respect for the Badgers. I actually think in terms of validating Ohio State as a playoff team, playing Wisconsin outside the Big Ten title game may be a better deal for Ohio State than playing Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game would be on December the 19th. But this is a Badgers team that's both missed some games this year and also not been perfect in games that it has played. Primarily, it's the Northwestern game for Wisconsin that comes to mind here, where some of the offensive firepower we thought the Badgers might have with Graham Mertz at quarterback early in the season that kind of showed up was not really present in Evanston a couple of weeks ago. The Penix loss for Indiana, you can't overstate how big of a deal this is. I'm assuming that for the most part neuters the Hoosiers offense. But 14.5 is still a lot of points on top of the key number of 14. I'll take a flyer on the Hoosiers with that in mind. That puts the flow still on the side of the Badgers, but give me Indiana plus 14.5. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take Wisconsin, though?
I'm gonna have to take Bucky and the Badgers here. It's just too much to take. Indiana losing Penix. He's the heart and soul of that team. He's the spark. He tore his ACL. I mean, I have no idea what to expect from their offense. Within there, I think they probably have a pretty good chance of winning this game. And without it, I just don't know. Don't know. So I'm just going to take Wisconsin, which is a pretty sound football team at home.
Yeah, and obviously very different point spread if Penix is playing. I think if you're curious about the weather in Madison on Saturday, high of 37. Once again, no real precipitation. This is a pretty classic Big Ten game. Late in the year, you get some cold temperatures. Indiana's probably also used to that to a degree too. So weather not a big factor there, but interesting to hear Dari laying a fairly sizable number just on the basis of, what Indiana might not be able to do offensively, given the fact that Michael Penix is not there.
Yeah, and you talk about the weather. I mean, that's like 75 degrees and sunny down here. That's a perfect football day for them up there. So
there is definitely an exchange rate related to those kind of temperatures for sure. All right, go with the flow presented by R.S. Andrews. Let's come back to the SEC in Athens in particular, with Georgia hosting Vanderbilt. Big spread here. We told you 35.5 points. Also fairly big number. We haven't seen many Georgia totals in the 50s this season, but this one currently stands at 52.5. That's your over-under mark. Mike, you want to go with the over or the under on 52.5 for the dogs and the doors? Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, like I said, that's not enough. Kirby doesn't have a roommate coaching on the other team, a former roommate. He's going to keep the throttle down. He's got some receivers he's got to get the ball to. They can work on the passing game, I think. I think Kirby's made his point as far as being balanced and being able to run the ball. I think that they're going to light up the scoreboard. It's senior day. Let those kids have some fun with a savage mentality. Take the over.
So Mike Griffith goes over there for a Georgia against Vanderbilt. Jeff Sentell, how about you? What do you think?
I think I would take this one 62.5. I like it to go over.
So Jeff Sentell likes the game to go way over the 52.5. A lot of confidence for a Georgia team that's only recently found a way to start scoring points at a really high clip. What about you, Connor Riley? 52.5 for Georgia and Vanderbilt.
I like the over here as well. I just think they're going to want to score. They're going to want to throw the ball around. And quite frankly, if this Vanderbilt defense looks like a quarterback named Connor look really good, imagine what JT Daniels could possibly do. And Vanderbilt team is head is at right now because of that. I like Georgia to score a lot of points and not give up a whole lot on the other side.
So a lot of confidence here from our Dog Nation audience with the game, or I should say Dog Nation staff, but the game going over. Dog Nation Daily audience, a little different. Oh, actually, really. They're on the same page too. 2-1 margin, 67% do take the over here as well. I don't know, Dory. 52.5 just seems kind of like a lot. And I hate to be a wet blanket here because I've actually enjoyed Georgia the last couple of weeks being, 30-plus points against Mississippi State, 40-plus points against South Carolina. 52.5, though, is just still too much for me. I'm going to go under here on this. I'll be the lone person on the side of that for right now. Frankly, I'm not really sure, what Vanderbilt's really capable of doing offensively at the moment. You want to go with the flow, though, and take the over? That's where everybody else is.
Yeah, man, I'm going to take the over. It's a party. Hoping JT 5-star and the rest of the offense can cover this number on their own. Because that's probably what's going to need to happen. I don't see Vanderbilt contributing a lot to that total. Maybe they get 7 or 10 points, maybe. Hoping for some fireworks.
Yeah.
Again, it's just I need Georgia. Georgia needs to get out to big lead early. I think that's going to be key for both covering that 35.5 number and going over.
How would you feel about your Alabama play here? Where is there more value on Georgia for the entire game, or is there more value on what I'm presuming is a smaller number in the first half of this game?
First half for Georgia, yeah, maybe a first half play. I definitely don't like the overall number in the game, but first half play could definitely be something for Georgia, to get out quick.
Somewhere
do
around
expect that.
17, maybe for the first half, you think?
Yeah, I would like that. So I think anything under 20 for Georgia in that first half is a strong play. I like Alabama first half. I like Alabama overall. I'll probably like Alabama in the second half as well against that in that LSU game.
You may tie all the Alabama outcomes together in one little bow there, maybe. Certainly, it seems like they could at least have the potential of some extra motivation against LSU, which might make, if folks don't remember, there was a lot of celebrating last year after LSU's win against Alabama, and Orgeron was caught accidentally, I'll use air quotes here, on camera in the locker room, really boasting about what LSU was about to start doing to Alabama in years to come. So my guess is the folks in Tuscaloosa probably have a little bit of a memory of that.
They do, but LSU got a national. They got a national title last year. So,
They did.
And when you beat Alabama, I mean, you have all that built up. It's waiting, right? All these teams are waiting. I'm sure Kirby's waiting, and all these other coaches. When you can get to that stage and really punch the bully on the block, I mean, that stuff comes out, right? So, but yeah, Alabama, they keep doing their thing, and they're going to pour it on them this weekend, no doubt.
Well, Dari, it's great to talk to you. As part of Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. We certainly look forward to following these picks and checking back in with you again next week, and to the entirety of our audience. As I've told you, make sure you check out R.S. Andrews for all your air conditioning, your heating, your plumbing, and electric needs. You can really trust them for all of that. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. They can put a smile on your face. So check them out, rsandrews.com. And hopefully your picks this week put a smile on your own face. Follow along and make picks the same way we do. And we'll gather back here again next week to talk about how we did on Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Enjoy the game, everybody.